As a neurologist, I've spent decades studying how the brain behaves in its most fragile moments, and yet there is still one thing that continues to shock me. It's not a rare disease, it's not a genetic disorder, it's a routine so ordinary, so familiar, that millions of people over 60 perform it every single morning without a second thought. And despite its simplicity, research from the American Heart Association, the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, and Harvard Health repeatedly shows that the earliest hours of the day are when the brain is at its highest risk for a stroke. You see, when most people open their eyes in the morning, they assume their body is simply waking up, but inside the brain, something far more dramatic is happening. Blood pressure surges as the body transitions from rest to movement. The vessels, already stiffened by age, struggle to expand. Circulation is slower. Oxygen delivery lags behind demand. And according to multiple studies published over the last decade, the first hour after waking produces some of the most unpredictable spikes in vascular pressure seen throughout the entire day. Now imagine that at this exact moment, when the brain is rebalancing, when the cardiovascular system is shifting gears, when the vessels are at their tightest, millions of older adults perform a single morning behavior that multiplies this strain dramatically. A behavior that researchers have warned about for years, yet almost nobody talks about outside clinical settings. A behavior that many of my own patients have repeated for decades, completely unaware that it might be pushing their already vulnerable arteries past a threshold they were never meant to cross. What makes it so unsettling is how subtle it is. People don't feel pain when they do it. They don't feel a warning. They don't feel anything unusual at all. But inside the brain, microscopic vessels can be pushed to their limits. Plaque can shift, pressure can spike, and in a person over 60 whose vessels have become less flexible, whose morning blood pressure is more reactive, and whose circulation takes longer to stabilize, this routine may dramatically elevate the risk of a cerebrovascular event. I'm not telling you this to alarm you. I'm telling you this because too many people only learn about this danger after something irreversible has already happened. And they always say the same thing: I've done this every morning of my life. Nobody ever told me it mattered. But today, you will understand exactly why this seemingly harmless routine can be so damaging, and what simple changes research links with safer circulation and better brain protection as we age. The answers are clearer than most people think, and once you hear them, you'll never look at your mornings the same way again. And before we go any deeper, tap that subscribe button. It takes a second, and it ensures you never miss essential brain health insights that could protect you or someone you love. Before we go further, let me briefly tell you who's guiding you through this. Dr. Jacob Reynold is not a YouTube personality. He's spent more than 25 years inside clinics, imaging labs, and stroke units. He trained as a neurologist and later specialized in cerebrovascular medicine, focusing on how blood flow protects or harms the aging brain. He has worked on stroke risk pattern studies, contributed to multi-center research on early morning blood pressure surges, and spent years observing how subtle daily habits affect older adults in ways they rarely expect. He's not here to make you anxious. He's here because he's seen thousands of cases up close, cases where tiny details in a person's morning routine were overlooked until the consequences appeared on a brain scan. His goal is simple: help people understand what's actually happening inside their bodies, using real findings from organizations like the CDC, the American Heart Association, and leading neurology journals. But let's bring this back to you because you're watching for a reason. Maybe you're over 60 yourself, maybe you care for a parent, maybe you felt dizzy in the morning, or noticed pressure behind your eyes when you first stand up, or maybe you just want to understand why so many experts say the morning hours matter more than most people realize. Whatever brought you here, you're in the right place, because before we talk about the habit itself, you need to understand what your brain is vulnerable to, and why. To understand why one simple morning action can be so risky, we need to look at what a stroke truly is, not in medical jargon, but in a way you can visualize. Your brain runs on blood flow. Every thought, every movement, every memory depends on a constant stream of oxygen and nutrients traveling through vessels no thicker than a strand of hair. According to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, even a brief interruption can cause brain cells to struggle within minutes. There are two major ways this interruption happens. One is ischemic, where a vessel becomes blocked, often by a clot or a piece of plaque that shifts unexpectedly. The other is hemorrhagic, where a weakened vessel bursts under pressure. In both cases, areas of the brain are suddenly starved of oxygen, and the damage can develop faster than most people realize. Now, here's where the morning becomes important. After a night of sleep, your blood pressure naturally climbs as your body transitions to wakefulness. Harvard Health and AHA reports show this early morning surge is a known risk window, especially in people with stiffened arteries or underlying conditions. When you mix this natural surge with certain actions, sudden straining, abrupt movement, or anything that spikes pressure further, the vessels can experience stress they aren't prepared to handle. And the signs aren't always dramatic. In fact, many are subtle and easy to ignore: a brief wave of dizziness, a moment where one side of your face feels heavy, tingling in a hand, a sudden trouble focusing your vision, words not coming out clearly, feeling faint right after standing. These are signals people often brush off thinking, "It's just because I just woke up." But these small signs can be early warnings, hints that the brain is under pressure during a moment when it's least ready for it. And this brings us closer to the habit we're building toward. Because once you understand what the brain is dealing with in these first minutes, the danger behind that routine will suddenly make perfect sense. As we move deeper into this topic, it's important to understand why adults over 60 are far more vulnerable to certain morning triggers. This is not guesswork. It's supported by years of data, from sources like the American Heart Association, the CDC, and multiple studies published through the National Institutes of Health. Let's start with the most universal change: vessel stiffening. As we age, arteries gradually lose flexibility. They become less able to expand and absorb pressure surges. The American Heart Association explains that this reduced elasticity is one of the strongest contributors to higher stroke risk in older adults. So every heartbeat, every pressure shift, every morning surge places more force on the vessel walls than it would in a younger person. And then there's the blood pressure spike. Harvard Health and several long-term studies have shown that blood pressure naturally rises in the early hours as the body shifts from rest to activity. For someone with youthful vessels, that increase is manageable. But for someone over 60, with stiffer arteries, plaque buildup, or borderline hypertension, that surge becomes far more unpredictable. Now add dehydration. Even mild overnight dehydration thickens the blood slightly and makes circulation less efficient. The CDC notes that most adults don't drink enough water in the morning, especially older adults who may have a reduced sense of thirst. With less fluid on board, the blood moves sluggishly through vessels that are already under strain. Another factor: circulation right after waking is simply slower. Studies from the NIH describe how the cardiovascular system needs time to restart. The transition from lying down to standing sends blood downward due to gravity, and the body has to compensate. When compensation is delayed, which is common in older adults, the brain gets less oxygen during those first critical moments. And then we have sleep quality. Poor or fragmented sleep, which becomes more common after 60, increases inflammatory markers in the bloodstream. Inflammation affects vessel lining, making arteries more reactive, more sensitive, and more prone to pressure changes. Put all of this together: stiffer arteries, morning pressure spikes, dehydration, slower circulation, and increased inflammation, and you have a perfect setup, a vulnerable moment inside the body that most people don't recognize. And this is why the specific morning habit we're working toward becomes so dangerous after 60. It stacks directly on top of all these physical changes, amplifying stress on the brain's delicate vessels at the exact moment they're least prepared to handle it. Now let's shift to the moment when the risk hits its peak. According to neurological and cardiovascular research, the first 10 minutes after waking are one of the most unstable windows for the brain. Blood pressure is still climbing. This is the exact moment when millions of people perform a morning action that dramatically increases the pressure on those vessels. They've done it for years. They never question it. They assume it's harmless. Meanwhile, the brain is operating in a fragile state, where even a brief spike in pressure can become a serious threat. And this is why you need to understand the habit before you repeat it tomorrow morning. Because once you see what happens inside the body during these first few minutes, the danger will be impossible to ignore. We're getting closer now. Stay with me. The picture will click into place. Now that you understand how vulnerable the brain becomes in those first moments after waking, it's finally time to reveal the habit at the center of this entire discussion. The danger isn't hidden in your breakfast, it's not your morning walk, and it's not your medications. It's the sudden, intense strain or exertion that many people do before their body is physiologically ready for it. For some, it happens the moment they rush out of bed. For others, it happens in the bathroom, a fast, forceful, or difficult straining that spikes pressure far beyond normal levels. And for many adults over 60, it's the abrupt effort of lifting, bending, coughing hard, or performing any intense movement seconds after opening their eyes. This isn't speculation. Research published through the National Institutes of Health and the American Heart Association shows that sudden exertion can cause a rapid surge in blood pressure, far higher than the natural morning rise. This spike places immediate stress on cerebral arteries, especially those already stiffened with age. When pressure jumps that quickly, the vessels don't have time to adapt, and the force shoots directly into the tiny, delicate branches that supply key parts of the brain. This creates what experts call vascular shear stress, a sudden drag or pressure wave inside the artery that can loosen unstable plaque or weaken fragile vessel walls. For someone over 60, who already wakes up with reduced vascular elasticity and slower circulation, this added stress becomes a real threat. So when a person strains intensely the moment they wake up, when they push hard in the bathroom, when they suddenly exert without warming the body, that combination of morning physiology and shear pressure becomes far more dangerous than people ever realize. And again, this isn't medical advice. This is simply the mechanism researchers have documented for decades. Understanding these changes is the first step toward protecting your brain. So why does this routine become so much more dangerous specifically after age 60? The answer lies in 5 overlapping changes inside the body, each one supported by findings from institutions like Harvard Health, the CDC, and the American Heart Association. First, vessel elasticity declines. The arteries stiffen, losing the ability to expand when pressure rises. This means a sudden strain isn't absorbed, it's transmitted directly to the brain's blood vessels. Second, plaque becomes more unstable with age. Even small deposits inside the arteries can loosen when a sharp pressure wave passes through. If that material travels upward, it can obstruct a smaller vessel in the brain, a mechanism responsible for many ischemic strokes. Third, blood pressure sensitivity increases. Older adults often experience exaggerated responses to exertion. What would be a modest increase in a 30-year-old becomes a dramatic spike in someone over 60, and early morning spikes are already higher than normal. Fourth, cortisol, the body's wake-up hormone, is naturally elevated in the morning. The CDC and long-term endocrine studies have shown that cortisol boosts blood pressure and vascular tone. So when a sudden strain is added on top of this hormonal surge, the pressure effect multiplies. Fifth, the autonomic nervous system, the automatic system that controls heart rate and vessel tension, loses balance with age. Instead of adjusting smoothly, the body may overreact. So standing, straining, or exerting can send pressure soaring before the body can regulate it. These changes don't happen in isolation, they stack on top of each other. Imagine an older adult who didn't sleep well, who's dehydrated, who wakes with tight vessels, who immediately strains or exerts. Inside that person's arteries, the pressure wave slams into the vessel walls, and the brain becomes the target. I've seen this more times than I wish I had. A man in his late 60s, who felt dizzy every morning but shrugged it off, until one day, he suddenly lost vision in one eye. A woman in her 70s, who always rushed out of bed and strained in the bathroom, and eventually experienced a small stroke that could have been prevented. These stories are not rare, they are common, and they follow the same pattern again and again. Understanding this pattern is what empowers you. And the deeper we go, the clearer the picture becomes too. Asterisk, before you take your first step out of bed tomorrow morning, pause, because the moment you open your eyes, your brain enters the most biologically vulnerable window of the entire day. Neurology departments from institutions like Johns Hopkins, Harvard Health, and the American Heart Association explain that within the first minutes of waking, your blood pressure surges, your vessels tighten in response to rising cortisol, and your brain's oxygen demand spikes while your circulation is still sluggish. It's during this window, the first 10 minutes of the morning, when researchers have documented a higher frequency of cardiovascular events, especially in adults over 60. And yet, this is exactly when millions of people perform one habit that amplifies those risks dramatically. A habit that places sudden pressure on the cerebral arteries, ignites a rapid mechanical load on weakened vessel walls, and creates what neurologists refer to as shear stress, a force linked in studies to vessel rupture in vulnerable individuals. And the most alarming part, almost everyone does it without thinking. In the next few minutes, you'll understand exactly what this habit is, why age makes it far more dangerous, and what simple adjustments researchers say can help the body transition more safely from sleep to wakefulness. This is not medical advice, it's an educational look at how the body reacts during its most fragile moment of the day. Asterisk. The habit, sudden, forceful morning exertion immediately after waking. Examples: intense bathroom straining, abrupt bending, fast lifting, quick twisting movements, or engaging muscles heavily before the cardiovascular system has stabilized. Why it's a problem, based on research-backed mechanisms. Rapid blood pressure surge. Studies show a sharp BP increase in the first minutes after waking. Adding sudden exertion amplifies the spike dramatically. Sudden pressure on cerebral arteries. When you strain or push hard, intracranial pressure can rise abruptly, forcing blood rapidly against artery walls. Vascular shear stress. Abrupt force plus stiff morning vessels equals higher mechanical stress on artery linings. Increased stroke likelihood in vulnerable individuals. Neurology literature explains that morning hours already have a naturally higher incidence of cerebrovascular events. Sudden exertion adds fuel to that fire. 1. Reduced vessel elasticity. Aging arteries are stiffer, they're less able to absorb pressure spikes. 2. Plaque instability. Plaques become more fragile with age. Sudden pressure changes can disturb them. 3. Increased blood pressure sensitivity. Older adults often have stronger BP reactions to strain due to changes in vascular tone. 4. Morning cortisol spikes. Cortisol rises sharply after waking, naturally raising BP before any activity even starts. 5. Poor autonomic balance. The cardiovascular system takes longer to switch from a sleep rhythm to a daytime one. 6. Case examples. Educational only. Neurologists often mention anonymous reports of individuals experiencing dizziness, faintness, or acute vascular events after sudden strain upon waking, especially those with underlying, undiagnosed issues. Skipping water after waking. Dehydration thickens blood slightly and can make morning pressure spikes more intense. Standing up too fast. Orthostatic drops followed by rebound spikes place stress on the vessels. Holding your breath during exertion. This creates an internal pressure buildup that shoots BP upward, the Valsalva effect. Sudden caffeine on an empty stomach in high-risk individuals. Caffeine can intensify morning BP surges and elevate heart rate when the body is still transitioning out of sleep. Cold shock immediately on waking. Cold exposure constricts vessels, amplifying pressure at the worst possible time. Heavy lifting right out of bed. Muscles and vessels are still cold. Sudden load heightens strain on both. Gradual activation. Start with slow breaths to ease the cardiovascular system into wakefulness. Hydration before exertion. A small amount of water helps circulation wake up smoothly. Light warm-up movements. Neck rolls, shoulder circles, ankle rotations. Nothing intense, just switching on the body. Controlled breathing during exertion. Avoid breath holding. Steady exhaling reduces internal pressure. Allow 5-10 minutes for the body to stabilize. Let blood pressure, heart rate, and vessel tone rise gradually rather than abruptly. Before we continue, there's something every viewer must understand. Certain morning symptoms after waking or sudden strain should never be ignored. Neurology research emphasizes warning signs that signal the brain may not be receiving enough oxygen or stable blood flow. Sudden dizziness can indicate rapid blood pressure shifts. Blurred vision may occur when blood vessels supplying the eyes or visual cortex are affected. Severe headache after abrupt activity often signals vascular stress. Numbness, even brief, may reflect altered circulation to the nerves. Slurred speech or sudden imbalance can indicate that the brain's language or coordination centers aren't functioning normally. If any of these appear, are intense, or persist, seek professional care promptly. Awareness in these early moments can save lives. The good news is, adjusting this one morning habit can have immediate benefits. Research on cardiovascular transitions shows that a calmer start reduces stress on arteries, stabilizes blood pressure, and supports oxygen delivery to the brain. Vessels experience less mechanical strain, and early morning inflammatory triggers decrease. Gentle activation also improves alertness, attention, and overall cognitive performance throughout the day. Instead of risking a sudden spike that pressures stiff, aging arteries, these simple adjustments allow the body to shift smoothly from sleep to wakefulness, keeping both the brain and cardiovascular system safer. It's small changes with measurable effects. Once you understand why sudden morning strain is risky, the question becomes, what can you do differently? Dr. Reynold highlights a simple, low-risk sequence designed to support brain blood flow in the first 5 minutes after waking. Start by sitting up slowly, allowing circulation and blood pressure to adjust naturally. Take deep, controlled breaths to oxygenate the brain and calm early morning stress hormones. Sip a small amount of water to combat overnight dehydration. Gently move your neck and shoulders to warm up muscles and vessels. Transition slowly. A brief walk to the bathroom helps your body stabilize. And during any exertion, maintain controlled breathing to avoid sudden spikes in internal pressure. These adjustments are educational in nature, giving the body a safer window to transition from sleep to activity. Let's recap everything in a way that sticks. There's a single morning habit that millions repeat, often without realizing it. Sudden intense strain immediately after waking. It's dangerous because it rapidly spikes blood pressure, stresses cerebral vessels, and creates shear forces in the arteries. After 60, this risk triples due to stiffer vessels, plaque instability, higher blood pressure sensitivity, elevated morning cortisol, and reduced autonomic flexibility. What to do instead? Gradually activate the body, sit up slowly, breathe deeply, hydrate, and move gently before exertion. Two most important tips to remember: avoid sudden morning strain, and give your body 5-10 minutes to stabilize before heavy activity. This small shift can make mornings safer for the aging brain. Before you leave, take a moment to hit that like button if you found today's insights useful. Each like helps this channel reach more people who need to understand these critical brain and vascular risks. By engaging, you are helping share information that can keep older adults safer, and it allows us to continue creating content backed by research from institutions like Harvard Health, the CDC, and the American Heart Association. If you want to stay ahead of hidden risks, subscribe now. In the next episode, we'll reveal the one daily food that quietly raises blood pressure in millions of seniors, and most don't even realize it. You'll learn simple strategies to manage this risk, just like we've done today with morning routines, so you can protect your brain and circulation every day. Remember, everything shared in this video is for educational purposes only. It is never a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for personal guidance, especially if you notice any concerning symptoms like dizziness, numbness, or sudden headaches. Awareness and prevention are powerful, but they are not a replacement for professional care.